Okay, it is 4 o'clock Monday, March the 27th, 2023. I'd like to call the meeting to order. The BEDC Board reserves the right to convene into executive session at any time during the meeting regarding any agenda item in compliance with the Texas Open Meeting Act, Chapter 551 Government Code. Before I go to public comments, I do want to notice that we do have a quorum here. There's a few of the directors that have resigned, but we do have a quorum here, so I just want to make that a note. Okay, we'll go into any public comments. Do we have any at this time?
No, sir, we do not.
Very good. All right, Section 3. Welcoming Drew Chance, the new Marketing and Business Development Manager for the BEDC. Drew, stand up and show everybody what you look like. All right.
He's going to tell you a little bit about himself and his
Good,
background.
please do.
Hello, it's good to be here. I wanted to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm most previously come here from the Sam Houston State Small Business Development Center. Prior to that, I have about 8 years of small business ownership experience. I also worked in a city budget office, and in order to do that, I had a master's degree in public administration from the University of Kansas. So that's a little bit of my background. Role is kind of twofold, a little bit of marketing for the EDC, and then also support for small businesses, mainly on the retention and expansion of existing businesses. So, giving them what they need to, survive and thrive in the community. So that'll be my focus.
Well, good. Well, welcome aboard. All right, 3.2, approval of the meeting minutes of the BEDC regular board meeting on February 27th, 2023, and the special board meeting of March 13th, 2003.
Chair Spencer, I would like to point out the version of the minutes from, February 27th, 2023, that there's a copy of them in front of you with one additional word highlighted. And that would be the final set of minutes to be signed by you this evening.
Okay.
If approved.
All right, thank you. Okay. We're going to need a motion here to approve.
Move to approve. Second.
Any discussion? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Very good. All right, 3.3, receive the financial report provided by the City of Bastrop's Chief Financial Officer for the period ending February 2023 and comments.
I think I'm going to have an assistant. Okay, so the financials for February are pretty straightforward. $422,000 in revenue, $140,000 expense. Variance, so we're carrying a variance revenue over expenditures of around $932,000, not $300,000. Next slide. Just a snapshot of sales tax, since that is the highest revenue that comes into the fund. We are about 1.5% over our forecast, and so we're still above what we forecasted, so that's good. Next slide. Forecast to actual on expenditures, a forecast of about $931,000. Actuals was around $611,000, which is about 34% over the forecast. Next slide.
It looks like the main part of that is just the personnel.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And on the capital outlay projects, there was almost $300,000 in the Jackson extension. I have a note at the bottom, $5,000 coming out of the 2023 CO account. And so that doesn't actually come out of the EDC funds, but it comes out of bonds that EDC has supported. So I think that's it.
Any comments or any questions from anybody? Okay, great. Thank you very much.
I think I'm the next item, so
Yeah.
I was just going to stay up.
Okay, good deal. Okay, 3.4, receive presentation of the BEDC's portion of the annual comprehensive financial report for period ending September 30th, 2022, presented by the City of Bastrop's Chief Financial Officer.
Yes, so I included the pages that were relevant to the Economic Development Corporation out of the comprehensive plan. It's a very long plan, so I was trying to highlight just your pages. I did include the auditor's report. I won't go over that, but these are the audited page numbers. Page 34, you'll see that assets of the fund are around 11 million. 9.3 of that is cash and cash equivalents, so very liquid. And then on the next page, page 35, liabilities are approximately 3.5 million. So the net position for the fund is around 7.5 million. So if you flip to the next page, page 36, for this fiscal year, expenditures were approximately 2.3 million. These reports on 36 and 37 are a little hard to follow. And then on page 37, total revenue was almost 5.2 million, netting a $2.8 million change. So we brought in 2.8 million. Beginning net position for this fiscal year was 4.7, ending at the 7.5 million in the ending net position. The next page I included just kind of explains, this is in the audit report every year, explains what a discretely presented component unit is. So I just wanted to include that if there were any new board members. And then the next couple of pages are, page 74 is our capital assets for EDC. You have some land and some construction in progress, totaling around $760,000. And then those are all the assets that the corporation owns. And then on page 76 at the bottom, it shows the summary of EDC's debt. You'll notice that there was quite a bit of reduction, to 2.7 million in reductions, because we know we paid off quite a bit of debt in fiscal 22. So that leaves an ending balance of 2.76 million. 275,000 of that due next year, or due within fiscal 2023. And then on page 78, it breaks out at the top the individual notes to the city. So those are EDC's percentages of those certificate of obligations and what those balances are. That's where you get the 2,760,000. And then at the very bottom, there is just another schedule for EDC that just shows by fiscal year the principals and the interest for each. And I think that's it.
Any questions or comments? All right, well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Very good, okay. We will now move on to 3.5. Discussion and possible action regarding the appointment of an interim executive director for the BEDC. Let's see here. Okay. If I'm not mistaken, the last time we met here last week, we appointed Sylvia Carrillo as the interim executive director, and we stated that it would be interim until the next meeting. But really what we're really talking about here is, because we've got a new election coming up in May, we're going to be having new city council members, we're going to be having new board members here in board. Really and truly, this needs to be extended until those are accomplished. So in my opinion, it's going to be something along the June timeframe before we sit down and talk about what our next steps are, whether it's a new search or whatever it may be. So I just would like for the record to clearly show that we're going to be, taking some time here and whatnot. And anyway, so would be the recommendation that I have.
Do we need to go into executive session to get some advice from our attorney, or should we, Mr. Zek, talk about that out here? Because I know there was some discussion about compensation.
And that is, yeah.
That's okay. We can talk about it up here, if it's okay with the board. So the statute says that, that the city cannot provide anything of value to the corporation. So there needs to be some remuneration back to the city with respect to the use of Sylvia's services, which can be worked out between, the city and the board. It just needs to be done. And it seems to me the easiest way to do that, and it's up to the city how the city wants to utilize those dollars, ultimately. But it would seem to me the easiest approach would be just a change in the services agreement that includes a certain amount for those interim services, just a set amount, whatever we determine that amount should be.
So can we do that tonight with the way things are posted?
Yes, I think that we can, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would anybody like to feel more comfortable talking about that executive session versus here and then come out and make that, or
Has
what?
anybody talked to her?
That's a good question.
I didn't hear the question.
Sylvia, why don't you give us your opinion of that as far as being able to?
Do you want to have a conversation in executive session?
Yeah.
Happy to have the conversation in executive session, happy to have it out here. For the sake of transparency, I think everybody needs to know I've not been paid a dime. There was no premeditation. So I'm happy to discuss it either way. I've prepared some information to the board. I've shared with you the weekly reports on how much time I'm spending with the EDC. Yeah. So in my opinion, a proportionate share of what the salary was being paid to the prior executive director would be appropriate. And I'm not talking 50% either.
Yeah, and I think this discussion probably should occur in open session, since it's really a service agreement between the city and the, with respect to the appropriate compensation for the services being provided by the city.
Okay.
That would be my comfort.
Yeah, that's fine. I didn't want to be.
Sure, yes.
So do you have a suggestion, or that's totally up to
No,
the board?
I
Do you have
really
any past
don't.
experience?
Yeah. I don't know how much, I really don't know how, I hate to throw out a number, it's really a policy decision. What does the city believe is appropriate remuneration for the services that Sylvia is going to be providing on an interim basis? Whatever, portion of her time is going to be dedicated based on the portion of her time that she provides to the city is the number, whatever that happens to be.
Chair Spencer, I think you had an opinion about it. I'm not sure if your mic's on.
No, it's not. Yeah, my thought on this was we take a percentage, and I'm just going to use this as an example, okay? We take 20% of the current salary, and that's what BEDC would pay to the city. And then the city would have the ability to fund that however they see fit. What I don't know is that over and above the current salary, or is that in lieu? So that's the exact same, you know what I'm saying? And I'm just going to use an example. If you're making 100 and we put in 20, does that mean the city now pays you 80 and we pay you 20, or is it 20 over the 100? That's what I don't understand just yet.
Yeah.
So I would say it's over, because my life has become quite full. Luckily, I don't have any small children at home, and a spouse who doesn't mind sharing the time. So that would be my preference. I'm still required to do my duties based on a contractual obligation with the city. So I don't have the opportunity to perhaps take anything off my plate that by charter is required to be on my plate.
That's true enough.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, ultimately, ultimately, it's a little weird because because you're the...
It's weird.
Right. I mean, just not weird in the sense that it's not been done, because it's been done multiple times. It's just that we don't have any control as the board how those dollars are allocated to the city manager. Although I tend to agree, she's taken on extra responsibilities, but that's not within my place although that is my phone, that's not within my place to say. But having said that, a percentage of, 20% or whatever we think that number is, we just change the agreement, we pay that to the city, and if the city chooses to increase Sylvia's salary by that amount, they can, however they want to handle it.
So, Chair Spencer, I would suggest maybe, and I think it's fair, how does 20% sound? Does that sound reasonable? Is that too low? Should it be more like 25? The documented hours that are being spent on this stuff is a smaller percentage if you do it based on the fact that she's working 80 and 100-hour weeks anyway. But I want to be fair and reasonable, and we are certainly getting an abundance of information as her time as serving as the executive director. So do you have a percentage in mind?
I think 25% would be appropriate.
So Chair Spencer, I'd like us to do 25% and that we automatically review that in 90 days and leave it open that if in 30 days she's like, look, really it's taken more, or we've gotten some things resolved or whatever. But I don't think it should just be a set percentage forever because we're getting into some uncharted territory.
And
That's
so,
fair.
because I am not clear, is it 25% of the current executive director's salary or 25% of Sylvia's salary with the city?
The current executive director's
Okay,
salary.
all right.
Which
Just to be clear.
for clarity.
Yeah, just
And
for clarity.
And I did not include, in my mind, that doesn't include the car allowance or anything like that. It's from the base salary.
The base salary.
I do not receive, for the record, I do not receive a base salary, a car allowance as a city manager. So
Well, I think you deserve whatever you get, but having said that, I just wanted to make sure that was clear on the record so everybody knew.
yes.
That's a good point. I like your recommendation. I think that makes a lot of sense because Sylvia is taking on more responsibilities. And you're right, it's probably going to be a lot more than just 25% because you're just that kind of a professional.
Do you think that 90 days or should we do 60 days and take a look at it? Or do you have a feel for that?
I think 90 days takes you into the election cycle, and I think by that point, I'm hopeful that tonight you will make a decision on the recruitment contract, and then that's going to inform how we do. And it's certainly if the board wants to review in 60 days, that's okay too.
So it doesn't matter to me. I just don't think it should be open-ended forever. I
Yeah.
think we should have on the calendar to take another look at it.
I would agree with that. Charles, any comments, please?
Well, I think the 25% is reasonable, and the 90-day period is reasonable, and of course, for me, it would be in addition to what she's the salary now.
Yeah.
Because I know she's going to be taking on more work and doing more work, so.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. 25% sounds a lot more reasonable. As stated earlier, we're in uncharted territory. We don't know what's going to transpire over the next 3 months, and I think that having the opportunity to review this process to see how much time and attention the city manager has to give the EDC is going to have to be continuously discussed. So I'm good and certainly well deserved.
Thank you.
All right, then, entertain a motion for that recommendation then.
I'll make the motion to appoint the city manager as the interim executive director with a stipend would rate term of 25% of the current EDC director's salary for a period of 90 days to be reviewed at that time for the ongoing process.
Mr. Zeck, are you okay with that? Because that's different than what you said.
I'm comfortable with it. We can make it work. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The motion carries. Thank you very much. All right. Okay. All right, moving on to 3.6, discussion and possible action related to the contract and statement of work between the BEDC and Jorgensen Consulting. We're going to discuss that in executive session before we talk about it out here. So I'm going to move on then for 3.7. That's the discussion and possible action regarding an amended organizational chart for the BEDC.
I think that's going to be an executive session as well.
Okay, then,
Is your preference that that be an executive session discussion
We
at
can
first
discuss
as
it
well?
here and then move into, executive session if there's any questions or comments or any of the incumbents want to have a dialogue about their role. Obviously, the organizational chart had been flattened over some prior directors, And while each one of the employees is working in a specific area of expertise, during the absence of an executive director or during some time period where there is leadership that is needed within the organization, I'm recommending that the operations manager be just that, the manager of the organization during periods of, again, when you are between executive directors or if I am away and there needs to be some question, it is a good thing to have a good and clear chain of command, which is missing right now. I'm sorry, I would have moved that forward. You guys are staring at your paperwork. I don't normally like to kill trees, but I figured we needed to take a look at this. So the president and CEO is at the top, and then obviously the operations manager, and then underneath that is the project manager / workforce development. And then we have the new position that Drew is filling, the small business retention and marketing. From a scheduling standpoint, from a who's in the office standpoint, they do a good job right now of coordinating by themselves and amongst themselves on who's doing what. But it sure would be nice for me to be able to call one person and say, what does the schedule look like today? Who are we coordinating with? Who's coming in the door and whose level of responsibility that is? And if we need to delegate anything else, who's able to make those decisions? So my recommendation is that Angela, in her current role, keep her title, but be moved into a supervisory position over the project manager and the small business retention.
And adjust the salary 10% upwards.
10%, yes, sir.
Okay, very good. I personally think it's a really good idea. You need to have that kind of organizational structure to make sure that you're getting what you need on time, and there's one person that's going to be responsible for it. And Angela's been here a long time, and I think I think it's the right choice. So I think it's I like the recommendation myself. So, any other comments?
Linear management is always desirable. I move for approval of this organizational chart.
A second.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the motion carries. Very good. Okay, we are now going to get into the executive session, so let me get to the thing here, excuse me. All right, the BEDC board will meet in a workshop session to discuss, well, wait a minute.
Nope, we can go into executive session, or we can jump into the meat and potatoes of 4.1, which is existing. And
Gotcha. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that because I don't think the executive session is going to take very long, to be honest with you. So let's go ahead and jump into the workshop. So 4.1, the BEDC board will meet in a workshop session to discuss the following items. Number 1, discuss existing projects under consideration. The existing projects, the business and industrial infrastructure and expansion plans, and the capital improvement plans with the city. Number 2, discuss the impact of the existing policy to current and future projects and make any recommendations as necessary to BEDC operations. Number 3, discuss dates for a joint meeting with the City Council and set a regular occurring schedule for such joint meetings. And then number 4, establish a communication cadence with the Board of Directions. So if you will come up here and lead us in that, please.
Absolutely, I'll do it. I'll do it from here. So the board, you have a lot of projects in play, but they are in various stages of what we call play. They're in various stages of planning. And at this point, any one of the projects that are in preliminary engineering may reach a point where the project isn't feasible, and that is because of cost. That might be some infrastructure expansion that's needed, whatever that is. So right now we have Project Fiesta, which is the tortilla chip factory. That project is in preliminary engineering. We have had a discussion about perhaps a temporary pause because there's some infrastructure questions as we begin to coordinate better with the city, the city's engineer, the EDC engineer, and then you have different engineers for some of these projects that need to talk. There's a lot of outside conversation happening, and pulling them together may mean some different design and may mean moving forward in a slightly different manner. Mocha Ventures, everybody's familiar with that. We are still also in preliminary engineering. I do not have a submittal for Mocha Ventures as of yet. although we continue to have those kinds of discussions with Mocha Ventures. TA Bastrop, also preliminary engineering. Project Walk of Fame, we will talk about that one today in executive session. It will require the board to, one, receive information, and two, make a decision on that information. Project Triple Arrow, still negotiations regarding the site and/or incentives to the project. Project Boxwood is actually a multifamily / single family / commercial, haven't really decided what that is. We are still looking at preliminary lot layout and infrastructure. This is the project that would be impacted by South Street, any South Street bridge or any South Street crossing. Original conversation with the developer had been that if South Street happened, then that project would go away, and that's not true. The B3 code on the residential side has the ability to work through greater densities. So the developer has a particular ROI they need to meet, and we're able to work through it with him so that he has one product on one side of South and a different product on the other side of South Street that still meets his need completely. Burleson East, Mr. German has submitted what he needs to submit. We are in the city looking through his additional submittals. He received what we call warrants for his particular design. In the design, decided those warrants maybe don't meet what he needs. There's about 3 warrants. We've asked for some reconfiguration of Blakey because the daycare is in the way that I showed you at the last meeting. TxDOT is doing some work at the frontage. There's a sidewalk TxDOT has planned. There's a right turn lane there that TxDOT has planned. So we're making sure that before we guarantee or before we look toward any potential incentives, that everything matches and we're not engineering and re-engineering things. His initial ask is reasonable, and it is mostly road and infrastructure. Pearl River is also in preliminary incentive discussions. Council will see that discussion at the next council meeting, and it is, although they presented to the EDC, it is it's going to be a council decision because it's a very big ask, and it is a city council and a county commissioner's ask. There's no particular ask from the EDC per se in terms of incentives, i.e. waiving of permit fees or project fees or those kinds of things as of yet. Their big ask has a direct impact on city and county. And then Bastrop County, I met with the commissioners on, 2 county commissioners on a different project. We have a variety of things on the table, and then this particular project came up. In that discussion, several interesting items arose. One is the ability for the city and the county to work jointly. So is that a site that works? 2, in terms of funding capacity, does the county actually have the funds to do the building? And the answer to that was no, they don't. They have the initial investment, and even that was a little bit questionable. And then the other was, have we really looked at how big the site is in terms of usability when the detention pond has to be built? What's important for the EDC to know is you were on the hook in that deal for you guys to build and maintain the pond. What a deal is that? But those are all things that we have to consider. Ideally, any incentives that the board provides should have some return on investment, not only to the economy, but to the board as well. And so when we go into executive session, that's one of the items we'll be talking about. And then the microloan program, we had the presentation, we working with Roscoe Bank. We still don't have an actual application or what would be a good metric, or what is a good application, what is a good fund, what is a good ROI for a particular project. So we're still working through the details of that, and hopefully Drew, as he touches with the customers and touches with the folks who would be potential benefactors of this money, we could get a better idea of what it is people need and then develop metrics around that. Right now, we just kind of have a pot, but where does it go? How do we determine success? So that's a lot on your plate, and I didn't even touch workforce development here.
Definitely is a lot, and yeah, I mean, it's a lot, but it's nice to hear a lot more information and a lot of status updates, and continuing to have that, especially through the process that you've put in place and whatnot. So I appreciate that. Let's see here. I guess we're going to hear more about it in executive session, so I'll hold
You
off
will.
until my questions.
You will. So I'm going to move on, as also what you have on your plate is also the business park. This one's a bit of a, it's that rambunctious child we're trying to get in line and get into place. And I say rambunctious not because it is a difficult site, I say rambunctious because there are so many moving parts. So right now, you have the EDC's engineer working through a lot layout, but that lot layout is contrary to the lot layout that was approved a year or so ago. So when Doucette stood up before you and I stood up with him and I said, maybe it's better we just do this one piece. And I said that because that's really sort of segment one of other segments that connect to Haitian Village, that connect Pine Forest 6. So working through the development with Doucette, working with the city engineer, and now working with Colorado Bend and the potential of Boxwood and other developers in that area, it is a great possibility to be able to partner and offer something that is of benefit to everybody, including the EDC, as a mechanism to be able to receive some dollars back from any infrastructure investments that are made. The potential park layout, we're cognizant that the board is looking for maximizing the amount of lots and maximizing the businesses that can go in there. My concern, and we'll talk about this as we talk about policy, is the fact that we don't even know we don't know. So I've been asking the staff, where's our industry gap? Where do we know, what do we know is coming here, and how do we know those things that are coming here? We do a lot with Retail Coach, or did a lot with Retail Coach, to tell us where people were spending. Placer AI was going to do the same sort of thing. Except we're going to revisit the Placer AI contract because we have found it's not as strong. But just because people are spending here doesn't tell you a whole lot. So we're going to partner and share our resources and talk about the analytics, because I'm a very data-driven person. If folks are buying adult diapers, for example, that means the population is aging, something is happening. What industries are going to be attracting that kind of population, and who lives here? So we haven't had those core discussions as you think about marketing and as you think about the business park and who can actually go there. That kind of data informs what kind of workforce we're supposed to be going after. That kind of data informs what kind of marketing we should be going after. I don't want to go to ICSC. I don't want to go to the Vegas convention. I don't want to go to California. I don't want to go to any of those places until I know why I'm going there. And does it need to be EDC that's going there? We've got marketing arms with Visit Bastrop, the Chamber. We've got marketing arms around the city. It's better to leverage once we figure out exactly what it is we're trying to do. And unfortunately, you don't have that data in front of you. So we're building that data. We've asked the company that works with you right now, let's start with the tidbits. What industry is good that needs 15 minutes access to air? What industry is good that needs good access to road and needs to be within 30 minutes of a urban center? And let's just start peeling away at that layer to figure out what needs to be here. What larger industries are in our 30 and 45-minute windshield time, and what periphery industries would better be served in an area like this? You don't have that info today. We're building it. So it's hard for me to tell you what your lot layouts should look like without having an idea of where we're heading. It's that be careful where you're going, because you might get there. You might get there. And then we find out that really isn't where I wanted to go. And I tell the council all the time, I'm a big Bugs Bunny fan. I thought I was going to Florida, but I took a left turn and I ended up in, Albuquerque. So I want us to end up where we need to end up. And looking forward, after the business park is built out, then what? Then what happens to EDC, right? So the bigger question is, once you have that data, once you have those statistics, once you have that nugget of information about who's here, who's coming here, who could be attracted here, then we really get to work. Then we really get to work with everything around us, not just a business park.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Do we have any timeframes as to when we can get this data? And
Well, I'm afraid I'm gonna have to build it myself.
Oh.
We have a GIS analyst person coming on board with the city. The city has a software program called Esri, which is the parent company, and we have a program called Business Analyst. It's an expensive program. I don't expect EDC to have it, but we maintain the license because the city is a data rich. That's how we lay out our water lines, our wastewater lines. It is the same data that Retail Coach gives you, it's just repackaged differently. It's the same data Placer AI would give you, it's just repackaged differently. So we now have the root data. We're getting a GIS analyst on board who can then crank that out. And we're already interviewing for that position, so 30, 45 days. I know this is a high priority because I'm sitting here wondering, what are we doing with our lives? What are we doing?
Well, I'm not pushing for,
No.
a real short time frame. I guess the more comprehensive and accurate it is, the better, because that's one of the things, in my opinion, that we need to do. We need to know what is it that we fitted for here in Bastrop County or City of Bastrop, and what industries could we attract, including the workforce. Workforce development, you talked about that. I think that's a key, one of the big keys on corporations and big businesses wanting to come into a place where they bring good salaries and good jobs.
The Taylor plant, the Tesla, all of the big corporations that are landing in our periphery will all have ancillary businesses. What are those ancillary businesses and who do they employ and what kind of skill is needed? And is it a welding skill? Is it I'm going to use Gene as an example right now, but we had a comment about we may need dental hygienists in the area. Causation and correlation. We had a dentist come and say that. Well, is it because they don't pay as well? People don't want to travel to Bastrop. I mean, there were so many questions before I could say, yeah, I think that's a good idea that we have a dental hygienist program. It's the data points for me that I need to build in order to present a good case, because I can sell that to the school, I can sell that to ACC, I can sell that to any one of the employers who would potentially participate, right? It doesn't have to all be our nickel. It's a collaborative effort to build the community.
I like it.
I have a question on I understand the lot layout could change based on industry and stuff, but the need to have connectivity does not change.
Correct.
So do you feel like we're in a position of moving forward with the road layout, or are you wanting to hold off on that as well?
I think we can move forward with the lot layouts. We're having a discussion with Doucette. Again, he had the completion of technology, right? Loop-in technology. And that's okay. That was sort of phase one. The connection down to Tahitian and the connection to Pine Forest 6 is what is in the original lot layout. I think there's a number of lots that can be created. It's just determining what those lots are based on industry. But I think the road layout could definitely move forward.
I'm of the opinion that I'm glad to hear you say that, because I think finalizing the roads and getting the roads in place, any industry, they're going to want shovel ready, and the ability to be able to drive them and show them where the lot is, and to not then be saying, oh, but we need to connect to Pine Forest 6 or whatever it is. It feels like I feel like it's like the spine needs to be in place, and then we can start adding meat and bones around it.
So, and we had some of that conversation as well about when we are in today's environment, when we are going out and trying to attract industry, and we go, hey, we've got this great piece of property on Chestnut in Maine, it's a great property, and then they get here and it's infrastructure poor, and they're asking for an incentive, or they're asking for other additional help per se. So really partnering and bringing us all under one roof, where staff is now attending DRC, they're having access to the maps. You can actually see where we have infrastructure. So it's much easier to have a really attractive piece of property where we're helping an owner, we're helping industry get here. Again, once we identify what industry that should be. But yes, shovel ready is super important. It's all about time and money, right? The interest monster is always hungry, especially today, where interest rates continue to rise and risk. We're becoming a little bit more and more risk averse. All right, so we're going to move on to also lots of projects, and I know that's probably hard to see, and I hope you can see it on your presentation. Trey warned me that it would be small, but I ignored him, as I often do. Sorry, Trey. So we have, there's a capital improvement. These are all capital projects that the EDC has partnered with the city or are looking to partner with the city for the betterment of there's some regions, for example. So as we talk about a lift station move, the prior director had talked about a lift station being moved to a piece of property that is next to the school bus barn that EDC owns, that is sort of a flag-shaped lot. What that would do is move the lift station out of the industrial park, create potentially another viable lot in that area. And with the lift station moved to the other side of EDC property, it opens up that entire property. It opens up all of Lover's Lane, it opens up everything south of Lover's Lane, and it opens up additional areas in the park that it can connect to. So we're gonna talk about that in executive session as well. Anytime we are extending, one of the things I'm going to really encourage the board to look at, not just with me, but in the future, is as you are looking at extending infrastructure as an incentive for a business per se, that we look at it in such a way that the EDC can receive some of its money back as people connect onto the line. So. The detention pond, again, there's no definitive location. Right now, as we work through South Street and we work through some of that development, there is a detention pond we all know that's been identified in the EDC, but it may change a little bit, it may grow depending on what the development is in that area. We've talked about the Lover's Lane Bridge. Is it going to be South Street? Is it going to be Lover's Lane? Right now, the engineers are studying both South and Lovers to determine which one is going to make it. Again, the argument had been if you do South, you're going to kill a development. Well, that's not true. We're working through that.
Do we have a feel for when that study will be done?
Next 30 days, I believe, Trey? 90, okay. Okay. Blakey Lane. The engineer has been selected, and we're expecting the survey for the design is going to be the next step. And again, that one is going to be tied up into the Burleson East, so there may be some realignment there that's needed. Agnes Street is at 60% design, and we are wrapping up land acquisition for that. There's an intersection improvement project also. We have rolled the school into that too. We want to make sure that the school is partnering and participating as well. There's a lot of things that the school could be helping with as well in terms of alleviating traffic concerns and improving some of our intersection grades that end up affecting us all. The Transportation Master Plan, the EDC had a role in that. The consultant has been selected, and we are now in the data gathering stage. And then the EDC also funded a portion of the Parks Master Plan via the Sports Complex study. So that is in progress, and that is expected to be completed by summer. As part of the Main Street, the BEDC funded downtown lighting. So an engineer has been selected, and we're working through lists of materials in order to make that project a go. So I really want to reiterate the fact that we...
Can I ask you a question about the
Yes.
downtown lighting?
Yes.
Have we confirmed acceptance of that by the people who own those buildings?
So we're going to revamp that. So the original plan had been that we were going to be on people's roofs and need to do that. We're going to revamp that. There is a way to light downtown in the public rights of way.
Thank you.
Through aerial lighting, et cetera. You see it a lot in Sweden where it's lit, but we don't have to go on people's property and affect.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. So I really wanted to stress on the fact that although we may not appear to work well with the city, we are working. We are working together, and it's a matter of now sort of peeling back that onion and figuring out where our roles are. And I continue to stress to staff on both sides of the aisle, per se, that there is a point of a handoff so that we don't cause a collision. And there's a point of a handoff early on when somebody first comes in the door so we don't cause a collision. I don't want to be promising something as a city staff member on this side of the aisle that EDC can't fund because it's against the statute, et cetera, giving people false hope. And then on the other side of the aisle, I don't want to be committing and talking about capital items when I have no idea what's happening in the area. I've got some idea, but we have been really, really poor about sharing information. And so I'm hopeful that now with everybody at the table, you know, it's easy to see where infrastructure lies, and it's easy to begin to have those conversations. So policy 4.2.2. So just real quick, you all know that the EDC, the Type A, Type B is established by statute. The board was incorporated in '95. It is a 1% sales tax for the purposes of economic development. And the first meeting was held on April 4th of 1995. The next one is, this is a hard one for folks to understand. It is an independent-dependent relationship. The board is independent. You have your own attorney. You have your own requirements for posting agendas, et cetera, but you're dependent in the fact that your decisions, you know, have to be approved by council. So from the fact that it's dependent but independent, I feel like it's a strained teenage relationship sometimes. It's that child who really wants to be out of the house but really can't afford to be out of the house just yet. It does not have to be an adversarial relationship, is my point. We can work through things, especially if we're sharing information. We can all understand why something is important, or why the city council would perhaps vote something down, or why the BEDC wouldn't support a particular item. It may make sense to the council, but not to EDC, or vice versa. It may make a lot of sense to the council, but not to EDC. So really understanding the why of certain things, I think, is super, super helpful moving forward. So the existing policy, and we'll just talk about that real quick. For the record, I don't think there's a whole heck of a lot the existing policy needs to change, but if we need to tweak a few things, and we'll talk about those few things here in just a second. Right now, the policy is focused on business recruitment, focused on sectors as recommended by the board and city council. You're focused on maximization of the business and industrial park, business retention and expansion. So on one end, we're recruiting, on the other end, we're trying to keep here. Promotion of the film, media, and entertainment industries, and then also workforce development. All intricately tied. In my opinion, and this is just my opinion, 50 cents won't even get you that in a cup of coffee. In my opinion, some of these are not tied enough. For example, when we were going out to recruit, are we sharing information with our local chambers, city, county? Are we sharing information with our local chambers on how it would impact existing businesses? Obviously, if we're going out, you know, we have a really good shop local strategy. Well, if we're going out and recruiting big box, it's going to have an impact on small business and our shop local strategy. So just some things to keep in mind, especially as we drill down into the data. What are we selling? Who's selling it? And is it really the kind of retailer that we want in our midst? Ron, you look like you had a question.
Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
I'm agreeing with you.
Oh.
Shaking my head.
So as part of the policy, there is a coordination effort requirement. And again, in this one, BDC is going to meet regularly. They'll include the city of Bastrop in all non-disclosure agreements. It's a regular bi-monthly meeting with staff. We're supposed to share information. We're supposed to share information on prospects and proactively discuss projects. And then on our end, the city is supposed to share information on city projects. This hasn't been happening to the level that it needs to happen. It just hasn't. The prior director and I had begun meeting every Monday at 7:30 to talk about projects moving forward. We never quite got to the problem-solving stage of the projects moving forward because there was so much on the plate at that particular time. The staff is now, Gene and Drew are now in the Development Review Committee meetings, which we have on Thursday mornings. They're actually all-day Thursday meetings. I've only had them go to the morning meetings to understand what has come in terms of an application, to understand what development is coming into the city, to understand where the application is in process, to understand any issues with the application, because what I was feeling is that people would play mom against dad. The city told me no, so I'm going to go try to get it through EDC. So just sharing the information. When there's, on Thursday in the morning, we'll do development review, and then in the afternoon, we do pre-application or early assistance meetings. Staff is invited to those as well, because it may be an industry that the EDC wants to work toward, and so maybe there is a potential to incentivize, or maybe there is a potential project EDC is working through. So much better coordination, and one of your next items is that joint meeting that is needed by the council and the EDC. Any questions on this? And I do want to say one thing about the non-disclosure. So we had a lot of conversations on what we can share and what we can't share. Rest assured, what I'm sharing is absolutely able to be shared. Anything that is compromising to a project, we will absolutely discuss in executive session.
When we're on that topic of sharing information, that has been an ongoing discussion for the 6 years that I have been around. And Mr. Zeck, at our last joint meeting with the city council, there was also discussion of, well, we can't share that information. Would you like to maybe clarify what can and cannot be shared with city council and the city manager when we're making financial decisions?
Sure. So is it, yeah, it's on. Okay, good. The first place we look, of course, is any agreement that was entered into, but with respect to non-disclosure, but typically those do not prohibit you from sharing information with an agent of the entity. As stated earlier, and I've stated multiple times, and not only in front of this body, but other large bodies of folks, the city and the EDC are, joined at the hip to the extent that the city actually is the individual that has to approve all expenditures, has to approve all programs, and makes those decisions. And so as a result of that, in my opinion, any information related to projects, programs, expenditures can be shared with the city because they are an agent, and in fact, more than an agent, they actually have control over the entity.
So we'll move to another section of the policy is accountability and accountability, / systems and processes. So the EDC will create standard applications, performance measures, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We do have some forms. I think where we are lacking, and we'll talk about this here in a little bit, is the performance of what does success look like? The Bastrop EDC will be successful if. What is that if? We've got to talk through that. We've got to figure out what that if is. Obviously, every industry has a different ROI or something that is considered successful. But if the EDC is going to measure its success by the number of small businesses it touched, the number of small businesses it helped, the number of small businesses it helped remain open, that'd be good to know. We just don't know that just yet.
Sophie, let me ask you a question here. I know in past experiences in different work environments, there's been lots of useful software programs and analytics that can be used to create those reports that shows the direct and indirect benefit, some of the taxes, the jobs that are going to be created, these kind of things. Are you using, or is the EDC staff using a current up-to-date program to get that information, or is it something that we need to go look at and see if we have the right program that we're using?
So we're using a program. We don't use the program as often because we just don't have that kind of project sort of walk through the door. We did have to play with it a little bit. I think there's probably some training that's needed, some maybe additional technical support that's needed. I don't know exactly what our contract requires. But some of those numbers are very sobering. The BEDC needs to understand that. For example, the software that's being used right now has a school district impact to it. The prior director, the superintendent, and I met every other Friday. As we talked through a project with the superintendent this past week, I shared with him the ISD impact, and was he aware, and is this something that they would want to support? It's cool, but it affects your bottom line significantly. And the answer was, if we saw those more often, probably not. You have a software. I'm not sure it is the best software. I think we can be better at learning how to use the software, and that's just through a matter of repetition.
All right, thank you.
Again, we talk about joint meetings and information sharing. So the policy was very redundant in a lot of areas. That's not a bad thing. So again, I'm saying, let's tweak what we have to make sure that you are receiving what you want. I'm going to move to metrics. That's the other, that's the big one, and I've touched on it. That's the needed metrics measuring success of the EDC. So, Chairman Spencer, this talks about, okay, you're evaluating projects to measure the ROI. What is a good ROI? So I'll give you an example. The first project run that we did, it requires you to enter what the city participation would be. So for example, if there's permit fees, if there's impact fees, those kinds of things that are paid, it looks very positive for the city. But if that's incentivized, the city looks like it takes a hit in the initial run through. Is that something we want to talk about as we lay it all out on paper? What is that good thing? Ideally, the ROI should, nobody should have a big red X on their back, not divided equally. So for example, in that particular case, we were minus 165 on the city, but plus on the county and plus on the school. How do we begin to share that? The schools are very limited on what they can share in terms of economic development incentives. The county has a role to play. How much have we involved the county? Not sure. Do we want to? I think it's all a basis of does it make sense financially for everybody if we're bringing in jobs and taxpayers?
Just in my opinion, my comment, I guess, is that there's not just one number that works for everything. It's going to have to be done on a project-by-project basis, in my opinion. So there's going to be times where you're right. One of the partners is going to have a much higher level of ROI versus the other one. But to me, that's the discussion point. And when we're meeting jointly with the EDC and the city, we can have that conversation and then make a decision based on everybody's, not everybody's going to win, but not everybody's going to lose. So it's going to have to be a negotiated item on a per project basis would be my take on it, would be my comment on it. But I'd like to hear others as well.
I don't disagree with you at all, but I think it might be helpful to have some minimum hurdles that you have to go over so that staff's time is precious, and there's some that you just need to walk away from. And I think it might be helpful to have some bottom line minimums.
That's good. Like a threshold. So, we should be setting a threshold that says, if it's below this, and I don't have that number, I'm just saying that we need to establish thresholds. Because you're right, Mayor, you're absolutely right. We need to make sure we're doing the right project that's going to have the biggest benefit, and we may have to walk away from some.
And if we were able to establish those minimum thresholds, or when they were established, if they're getting in 10 projects and 2 of them are way over those thresholds and 8 of them are below, it kind of helps you know how to spend your time. Now, to your point, sometimes projects are really unique, and there's always an opportunity to come back to the board and say, this doesn't meet your threshold, but there's more to this story, and this is why we want to bring it forward. And the executive director could work with staff for that. But I just, particularly Samsung, Tesla, SpaceX, there's tremendous amount of ancillary businesses, and some of them that you don't always think about, which might even be like dry cleaners for uniforms and additional lunch places and caterers, and you've got to have the ability to say, this is worth spending time, this is not worth spending time.
Absolutely correct. I think from a 50,000-foot perspective, so long as we all level out over what the board believes and the council believes is a fair time frame. It might be that the city is negative in the beginning, but we level out in year 3 and the other entities begin to take a drop in year 3. So long as at some point we equal out, and we know we may have one entity versus another who is further ahead, let's just say that in the...
Well, I think the combination of getting the right analytical program or app or whatever software and having all the joint meetings with everybody in the room so they're hearing the same thing, to me, that's where we're going to have the best utilization of our time and resources to make sure that we are hearing what everybody else is hearing. We do have the right program to come up with the ROIs, to come up with the thresholds, so that we are making decisions, data-driven decisions. Yeah. Okay.
Can I, one of the things I wanted to ask about is it possible that, in this cooperation, we all sharing and then the oversight from the city council, but is it possible that we start with the strategic plan? And, if the strategic plan lays out in whatever detail, is that next?
Yes.
Well, one other thing I do want to ask you, I think you mentioned that there's certain things that BISD can share or can't share.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess I have a question. To me, they play a big part in what we're trying to do, and that's recruit businesses. So is there something that we can, I don't know, legally, to me, there should be a lot that the school district should be able to give us, so when you go out talking to businesses, that we can talk about, the education system, mm-hmm. the workforce, and what we're doing to train the workforce. Is that something you can talk to us about?
It is, and I think we're doing, the EDC in conjunction with the school board is doing a yeoman's job in getting some training programs together, right, in conjunction with our partners. My question remains, are those the industries and are those the trainings that we need? I think from an ISD perspective, and I won't speak from for the superintendent, but there are some critical partnership links we have been missing. And I'll just use the example of municipal court. If the city's enforcing truancy or not enforcing truancy, as was the case, then the school doesn't stand a chance in getting kids in their seats and learning, right? So it's a partnership. We had to take some steps recently, and woe the children who were truants under the new judge. But if we don't talk and we're not understanding what the impact of that is to the school, not just in money of the kids not sitting in the seat, but two, dropping the overall scores and dropping the district standing, those are things one normally doesn't think about. But I will tell you, coming from other communities where industry has said, I would love to go to your city, but I can't because of your school.
Right.
I have heard that in many a community. And so what we've done is we really, what I did in the prior city is we partnered with the local college and created our own craft training center that really was a partnership between industry and economic development and the city and the local college. The kids went to school during the day and they had a job at night, and they did both, and they were guaranteed a job and they got paid during the job. So that took care of a lot of the folks that I had to not go to school because I had to work to care for my family. We have a very large population here of below the poverty line, below the extreme poverty line, right, who do have to make that decision of going to school or working. Right. So my only question is, as we get there, I just need to know what I'm trying to attract to be able to work with the school to do that. Who thought we were going to be teaching Mandarin in Corpus Christi? Not me.
Yeah.
Or Aransas Pass, not me, but.
Okay.
So this leads me back to really our strategic plan. And this, I'm trying to be a little bit funny with this slide, a little bit facetious after sharing all that information, but what are we actually doing? What are we doing with our lives? What are we doing with the information? What are we trying to attract? You do have a strategic plan that's a couple of years old, and it is pre-Tesla, it is pre-SpaceX, and everything else that is out there. Is it time to visit it again? Probably. I think there's a lot of things we can do internally. I am very fiscally conservative. You're not going to hear me say I need to go out and get a third-party contract. I want us to analyze the data, and then we bring in a consultant to verify some of that data. One, it's a lot less expensive, and two, you're in the sausage making. You as a board and the data can really understand what is it that we're attracting. And we verify with the school, and we verify with the employers, and we do our homework before we go out and let it out onto the street. And a big, again, I'm going to say, what is considered success? What is considered success? Is success those industries we've weaned away from Austin, who are going to be able to pay less here because Austin has a minimum wage ordinance? Is it industries that only have 2 or 3 jobs to begin with, but have massive expansion potential? Maybe, if the market holds, if the interest rates hold. Are we attracting that industry that is a great utility for the city of Bastrop, but that's about it? It's not going to be much of anything else for the corporation or for the city. Super, super, super important. Or are we attracting industry that, yeah, the industry base is here, but those employees are coming from somewhere else because, for example, we're not turning out engineers in Bastrop. So what is it that we're doing with ourselves? What are we really trying to do? Who are we trying to attract? And how do we get there? And you can't do that without the data. That wasn't meant to be a womp womp, but. All right. Are we ready to move on to the next item? Yeah. Okay. Dates for a joint meeting with the City Council and set a regular occurring schedule for such meetings. So April 18th is the candidate forum. So not a good day. But April 17th, which is your normal council, which is your normal meeting date, is a free council date. So there's a potential for the 17th, or there's even a potential for the 3rd.
I vote for the 17th. It's already on our calendars, and that would give us some time. And I'm also hoping, Ms. Carrillo, that because April 3rd is like right around the corner, and
oh, ye of little faith.
Oh, ye of little faith. Maybe by the 17th, you can have an opportunity to have some additional data, and we'll maybe know some more about some projects. And okay. I don't know. If your preference is the 3rd, it's open, and that's fine, but that's a week from today.
Don't have a preference. April 17th is, I'll take the extra days.
We got Easter and everything else in between now and the 17th. So.
I totally support that. 17th to me makes a lot more sense to have a little bit more time to put some of these things together. So
it's good for me.
And
absolutely.
All right, so.
It feels like our BEDC agendas may be a little bit shorter till we get some of this stuff done anyway. So that meeting normally starts at 5. If there's anything that we need to take action on, we could do a BEDC meeting and then do a joint meeting immediately after it.
That was my thought, that we would convene both the council and both can take action as necessary.
Yeah, I like it. I think it's a good idea. So let's put that down on the 17th then.
Okay. That's your regularly scheduled day. All right, Chair Spencer, you're back to executive session.
Well, hold on just a minute here. Let's just quickly talk about setting a regular occurring schedule for such joint meetings. What is your idea of that? Like on a quarterly basis?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I skipped one also.
That's all right. All right, quarterly basis, okay. Good.
So that would be the preference, that we do a quarterly check-in. It may be that we, at the quarterly meetings, they're very short. There may be an hour. We're talking about things that you both know via the memos that I'm sending both the council and EDC on Fridays, that has informed, and you'll be able to ask regular questions. And so the joint meetings hopefully won't be that long unless there is action that needs to be taken. And that's the other thing. When there is a large incentive package, it sure would be helpful to have y'all all in a room.
Well, yeah, especially when we have so many changes coming up here in the next quarter. So I think it's a great idea that we have it on a quarterly basis.
I concur with that as well, and if it's April, then the next quarterly would be July, which will put you
You're the
after
budget.
elections, right before budget. That's a really good time. And then you may find out in October that you don't need one because you've just accepted the budget, but it just seems like you're setting yourself up for good timing.
Good.
So I missed 4.14, the communication cadence. Super important, super important, super important. I can't even tell you how many things go out of City Hall. I have created a Teams channel for the staff. It is super critical for me to be able to just jump into a file wherever I'm at, whether it's on my phone or on a computer. I have created individual channels for the council member for council items. And in that channel is an issue tracker, and when you have a question or concern, you put it in the issue tracker. It keeps me honest, it keeps you honest, we stay on track. Items that eventually need to make it onto the agenda will come through the issue tracker. We'll talk through it. I meet with the council regularly, happy to meet with EDC directors as well, just to get us all asking and rowing in the same direction. You probably have questions I haven't thought about, and I'm happy to bring that to light, because I promise if you're asking, somebody else is probably asking too.
Well, I want to thank you for setting that up, because the more discussions, the more information we can share, and the questions we can ask directly, the better this whole thing is going to work. So I applaud you for doing that. I think it's wonderful.
Is there another method that the board, Teams is just something we all subscribe to, so it's not an additional cost, there's not an additional software. Happy to do it via email. Teams just keeps me honest.
No, I mean, we use it at my work, so it works out very well for me anyway.
Yeah, I like the channeling and probably as we go along to get more information on the projects and where we are, but also on the marketing and, on the recruitment side, because to me, workforce development is the key. And that's what I was saying. I think the school district has a lot to do. We got to spend some time with them if that's possible. Try to see if we can work out a way to get the education coming forth. And what are some of the courses that they're teaching over there? And I go back some years, but I remember when agriculture was taught in high school. And basically, when you got a high school, you could go do arc welding, acetylene welding. You could do all of that stuff, and you could go get certified. Now, I don't know if they teach that now, but to me, that's what some of the shortages right now is the proficiency in welding. I mean, there's plenty of jobs out there like that. So, and there's I think Gene has done a lot working with the schools on the education part. But to me, that's going to be the key. And I just see Bastrop could be a true hub for manufacturing. But I think everything has to be worked out through the education part, maybe community colleges and so on. And so
I'm glad that you say that, because as we talk through that workforce and the manufacturing, in that manufacturing, there's automation. So if the school's teaching robotics, we add a course that's related to automation. There is logistics, and so we add some supply chain, some project management. There's a lot more than just watching gauges and things. And
absolutely.
In terms of welding, we went down that path in South Texas, and we're cranking out welders. We think we've got a great program with the school. We're cranking out. We're doing well. Everybody's getting a welding certificate. And then industry came and said, "I can't use anybody that you're training." And we said, "Why not?" And they said, "Well, you're not training them to the specific metals we use. We're not just using any old metal. These are specialty metals that are very expensive, quite frankly, and if you ruin it, it's..." So they anteed up, and they partnered with the Craft Training Center and the city, and we began cranking out that welding certificate that was at the high school level. It took on a whole other notch. And the same thing for the maritime trades. But I gotta understand it. If I say we're gonna have an Amazon factory tomorrow, what does that entail? And what are those higher paying jobs, or even just the entry level jobs? What does that mean? The 600 jobs that SpaceX is bringing are people have described them as call center jobs. They're not. They're also troubleshooting jobs. So proper etiquette, proper English, those kinds of things are going to become super, super, super important for the industry around us. Okay, now I think you're ready. Sorry.
It's okay. All right, we are going to be moving into executive session. 5.1, the BEDC Board of Directors will meet in a closed executive session pursuant to the Texas Government Code, Chapter 551, to discuss the following. Number one, Section 551.087, deliberation regarding economic development negotiations, the Project Walk of Fame. Number two, Section 551.071, consultation with attorney regarding the Jorgensen Consulting contract. And then at 5.2, we will reconvene into open session after to discuss, consider, and take any action necessary related to the executive session.
Chair Spencer, could we also add item 3.7, which is the amended organizational chart, because that may come up as we're talking through some of it.
Yes.
So, wait, specific individuals? Because we can't have a general discussion about organization in closed session. We can only have a specific discussion on specific employees and their roles and responsibilities associated with that. And if that's the case, those employees have a right to have that discussion in open session.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, it is 5:15, and we're going into executive session now. Okay, the time now is 5:54 on Monday, March the 27th. The BEDC Board of Directors is reconvening into open session to discuss, consider, and take any actions necessary related to the executive session noted herein. And I don't believe we have any actions. Therefore,
I motion to adjourn at 5:55.
all those in favor? Oh, seconded? Okay, all those in favor? Aye. We're adjourned. Thank you.